Title 10 changes. The Biden administration reverses a rule that blocked abortion referrals. Facebook testimony. A whistleblower claims a social media giant is harmful to children. Provocative actions. How China is causing more concern for its neighbors. And abuse report. The church copes with a pattern of problems in France. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, October 5th, 2021. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this feast of St. Faustina Kowalska. I'm Tracy Sable. Well, President Joe Biden advances his pro-abortion policies. His administration is reversing a ban on abortion referrals by taxpayer-funded family planning clinics. It takes effect next month. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, the Title 10 clinics, as they are known, serve mainly low-income women, and very soon the strict separation between family planning services and abortion put into effect under the Trump administration will be history.
Not taking questions, President Joe Biden heads for Michigan. His trip comes less than a day after his administration issued a new regulation through the Department of Health. It says just a few weeks from now, Title 10 clinics will once again be able to refer a pregnant woman for an abortion.
It's not surprising because the Biden administration promised to be radically pro-abortion, and they have delivered on that promise.
Under President Donald Trump, those clinics were barred from using tax dollars to promote abortion.
Family planning programs were set up for people planning on families, not set up for abortion vendors whose goal is to end families. So we are disappointed that the Biden administration was able to get rid of the Protect Life rule, but we are not surprised.
President Biden campaigned on a promise to overturn the restrictions. In addition, the second Catholic president is against the Hyde Amendment. He does not believe that life begins at conception. He staunchly defends Roe versus Wade, and he rescinded the pro-life Mexico City policy.
But it really should motivate people to vote. We need to vote pro-life first, because these kinds of administrations, those committed to abortion, can spend a lot of your money trying to tell women that abortion somehow solves the problem rather than just creates new ones.
Meanwhile, the president flew to the Midwest pushing his massive and controversial social spending plan that's now in jeopardy. Senator Joe Manchin has said it's a no-go unless the Hyde Amendment is included. Before flying off today, the president held a virtual meeting with House moderates. He held a similar session Monday with progressives.
Now, Students for Life also says Title 10 funds underwrite Planned Parenthood's operations and help them market abortion. And this all happening during Respect for Life Month. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops saying, like St. Joseph, we are also called to care for those God has entrusted to us, especially vulnerable mothers and children. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, the director of the National Institutes of Health is stepping down at the end of the year. Dr. Francis Collins says that it's time for new leadership at the NIH Research Center after his 12 years of service. He has been highly visible addressing the COVID-19 and the accompanying vaccine development. He plans to continue work at the National Human Genome Research Institute. Well, Facebook is in the news, but it's probably not the publicity they want. A company whistleblower is accusing the social media giant, along with its other platforms like Instagram, of putting profits above child safety. Lawmakers are seeing an opening to take regulatory action against the world's largest social media network. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports.
Former Facebook employee Frances Hogan testified on Capitol Hill, urging more transparency from the tech giant and its social media platforms. Lawmakers agree.
Facebook and big tech are facing a big tobacco moment, a moment of reckoning.
Lawmakers say Facebook values its profits over kids' safety.
They knew what they were doing. They knew where the violations were, and they know they are guilty.
The former project manager on Facebook's civic misinformation team says Facebook hides its data, which shows getting kids hooked is the first step.
Facebook understands that if they want to continue to grow, they have to find new users. They have to make sure that the next generation is just as engaged with Instagram as the current one. And the way they'll do that is by making sure that children establish habits before they have good self-regulation.
Hogan claims controversial content like hate speech is regulated by artificial intelligence algorithms, but at most catches less than 20%. She testified Facebook has learned measuring this type of meaningful interaction, or MSI, makes users engage longer, forcing advertisers to pay more.
People's bonuses are tied to MSI. Right? Like people stay or leave the company based on what they get paid. And like, if you hurt MSI, a bunch of people weren't going to get their bonuses.
Hogan says Facebook must declare moral bankruptcy, but because Mark Zuckerberg controls majority of voting shares, that likely won't happen.
Part of why Facebook needs to come out and say, we did something wrong, we made some choices that we regret, is the only way we can move forward and heal Facebook is we first have to admit the truth.
Lawmakers kicked around solutions. One is to reform the law which prevents Facebook from being sued. Another is to form a federal governing body to oversee big tech. One thing's for sure, this issue is not going away. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
In Oklahoma, a judge has temporarily blocked 2 pro-life laws, but it is allowing 3 others to take effect on November 1st. One ruling cited against a heartbeat law. Another permits a board certification requirement for doctors who perform abortions in the state. Capital punishment for inmate Ernest Johnson will proceed as scheduled tonight in Missouri. Johnson was convicted of murdering 3 people during a robbery back in 1994. There were appeals for legal and humanitarian clemency, including one from Pope Francis. All were denied. Nicaragua's President Daniel Ortega is calling the country's Catholic bishops terrorists for their pro-democracy plan. Ortega turned protests during a 2018 coup attempt. He labeled the church's attempted mediation an act of promoting foreign interests. Nicaragua holds its elections next month. Meanwhile, a Marcos attempts a political comeback in the Philippines.
I am today announcing my intention to run for the presidency of the Philippines in the upcoming May 2022 elections.
Former Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is the son of the former ousted president. Already in the race is Manila's mayor Isko Moreno, as is retired famed boxer Manny Pacquiao. They all are seeking to succeed Rodrigo Duterte. Elections in Iraq are this Sunday, but many minority Yazidis are not confident in the candidates. Yazidis are reluctant to vote after violent displacement by the Islamic State several years ago. Iraq's parliament has several of its 329 seats set aside for religious minorities, but there are fears about a favored hardline Shiite militia candidate who has ties to Iran. Well, Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen warned in an essay published today that the world could face catastrophic consequences if the region should fall to Chinese control. China's People's Liberation Army has sent a record number of fighter jets into Taiwan's airspace in an apparent act of aggression to assert control over the island nation. The CCP considers Taiwan a province of China. Tsai Ing-wen wrote in a Foreign Affairs article that she wishes for peace, but, quote, if its democracy and way of life are threatened, Taiwan will do whatever it takes to defend itself. And joining us now is Gordon Chang, author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War and the Coming Collapse of China. Gordon, welcome back. Always so great to see you. Tensions really have been heating up between China and Taiwan, with China flying multiple warplanes into Taiwan's airspace. What is this signal, and do you think this situation here could escalate?
I think the situation clearly could escalate for a number of reasons. First of all, the Chinese, and we know this from their propaganda, don't respect the Biden administration, don't think that it's capable of opposing China. The second thing is that Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, is under unprecedented attack at home. There's a lot of infighting. We don't know the full dimensions of it because the system is opaque, but there are things that are occurring that are unusual. And of course, Xi Jinping has been identified with many policy debacles. So I think he's trying to look at Taiwan to try to unify the political system because he wants a common enemy.
And Gordon, you mentioned the Biden administration. How do you think the Biden administration and also the international community should respond?
I think that President Biden should get behind the microphone in the Oval Office and say publicly to the Chinese that the United States will defend the island, If he does that, I don't think China will try it. But right now, the Chinese are not exactly sure what Biden will do, but I think that they believe that they could get what they want, especially because the policies of the Biden team have visibly softened since the fall of Kabul. And I think they probably believe that for at least Beijing, things are going in the right direction. And that means they're probably going to try to press the advantage.
Yeah, I'm going to pivot here from Taiwan and something about you and I talked the last time that you were on about the Chinese real estate giant Evergrande and its troubles. And now it seems there's another developer, Fantasia Holdings Group. It's also facing some financial issues. What more can you tell us about that and also the impact of all of this on China's economy?
Yeah, Fantasia reported to stock exchange authorities that it missed a $206 million principal repayment yesterday. Fantasia is a lot smaller than Evergrande, but Evergrande, which has $305 billion in liabilities, is probably not going to make it. And it's probably going to trigger a series of defaults, and Fantasia is only the first of them. There's just too much debt in China. And although the Chinese authorities can sort of delay the ultimate reckoning, I think they're pretty much at the end of the string.
Yeah, and speaking of Chinese economy, President Xi really appears to be trying to redirect the Chinese economy to be kind of more under government control. What more do you know about that?
Well, Xi Jinping's plan of common prosperity is Maoist inspired. And essentially what he wants and what he demands is control. And he's willing to accept a lot of losses in order to accomplish that. There are various estimates of the diminution in value of Chinese tech companies and others, but some people put the amount at close to $3 trillion. So that shows you his political will. And he's not done yet in remaking China, pushing it back to something that Mao Zedong, the founder of the country, would be familiar with.
Yeah, Gordon, I want to switch gears here. As we mentioned earlier, Dr. Francis Collins, the head of the NIH, and one of the major point people when it comes to COVID-19, announced his resignation today. Meantime, there have also been reports that China purchased large amounts of PCR tests used to detect COVID-19, long before the first case was actually reported in that country. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Hubei province, which includes Wuhan, was starting to purchase these PCR tests in May of 2019. And that substantially changes the timeline for the epidemic because it really says that they knew something was going on. There's a Harvard Medical School study which was previously out there, which said that the authorities in Wuhan knew it was August 2019. That was considered to be really early. But you don't buy PCR tests in these quantities unless you think something is really going wrong. And so this changes the timeline even further back to May.
Yeah, well, Gordon, thank you so much for coming on. Always great to get your analysis. Gordon Chang, author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War and the Coming Collapse of China. Thank you again.
Thanks, Tracy.
Coming up, conclusions from an independent commission. The Catholic Church in France faces serious accusations of abuse. And extended deadline. Learn about the ongoing controversy in Germany. A new report released today details several decades of sexual abuse within the Catholic Church in France.
Une indifférence totale et même cruelle à l'égard des victimes.
Pope Francis and French bishops are expressing sorrow today over an independent commission's report that found as many as 3,200 pedophile clerics and religious abused over 200,000 minors since the 1950s. More than 100,000 more suffered from church workers. The commission criticizes church neglect and indifference towards victims. Well, as reported yesterday, a synodal way session of the Catholic Church in Germany abruptly ended. The assembly has been extended to 2023. Joining me now for further analysis is Rudolf Gehrig, chief correspondent for CNA Deutsch. Rudolf, welcome back. Great to see you. Can you talk to us more about the synodal way and what does this latest delay mean?
There were 3 days of discussions in Frankfurt, and there were the bishops were there, many participants, and there were 3 days of very tough and also rough discussions. And in the Saturday afternoon, you see, oh, this guy is leaving the building, this guy is leaving, and suddenly Bishop Betzing says, okay, let's check if we still have the 2/3 majority to make any decisions here. And after that, they recognized, oh, we need 5 more people to have this quorum, so they had to stop the assembly.
And I understand, Rudolph, this followed a controversial vote on same-sex union blessings and also the need to even have priests. Can you talk more about that, and what did the commission say?
Yeah, it was an amendment that was made to discuss whether priests are needed at all here in Germany, if you can imagine that. And they got a narrow majority. So that means, in fact, in the next month, the Synodal Way will discuss the question if the church in Germany or the church in the universe needs priests for its church life. That's the one thing. The other thing is that there was a document passed by a large majority that calls for same-sex unions that should be blessed by the priests. And Bishop Franz Josef Bode from the Diocese of Osnabrück described this moment as a Sternstunde, as a very great moment in the history of the church here in Germany.
Yeah, and also I understand a few days ago, a group of conservative German lay people said they're really concerned about the direction of the Synodal Way. What do you think that says about the state of the church in Germany, and what response, if any, has there been from church leadership?
Yeah, there are many groups of people here in Germany who criticize the Synodal Way. One part says they abuse the sexual abuse for their reforms, and that's why Bishop Betzing calls on the first day, he claims, no, that's not true. It's not allowed to say that we abuse the abuse for our reforms. And on the other hand, there are people say, wow, we are going straight into the schism. And they are already questioning to the Vatican, are we already in the schism? How do you react, dear Holy Father? And there's no answer yet, so maybe, but we knew that the Vatican is observing this process very, very well and very carefully.
And I guess we shall see what happens. Before I let you go, Rudolph, are there any other stories that you're following out of Germany?
There's still some hope. Yeah, I met a lot of people who are concerned about the church in an honest way. I met some priests that raised their voice and say, yeah, we have to go back to the evangelization. We have go back to the Holy Scripture and to know what people say. We have to do more catechesis. And they are not that well represented in the assembly, but they are still there. So, yeah, it's very important that they get some spiritual and prayer support, maybe from Catholics in other countries.
Well, Rudolph, thank you so much for your time in explaining all of this to us, and we appreciate it. Rudolph Gehring, Chief Correspondent for CNA Deutsch. Thank you again.
Thank you, too.
Up next, offering love despite differences, what Pope Francis is saying about good education, and university partnership. The Vatican signs a new agreement. While joining other religious leaders for a meeting on religion and education, Pope Francis said this morning, quote, "If we desire a more fraternal world, we need to educate young people to acknowledge, appreciate, and love each person, regardless of our differences." Finally, tonight, the Vatican has signed an agreement to work with a research university in Rome. Sapienza is the first Italian university to enter into an agreement with the Holy See's Department of Culture. Sapienza is considered one of the top schools in the world. Its graduates include the current Prime Minister of Italy. Joining us now from Rome is Alessandra Talamo, professor at Sapienza University and the consultor to the Pontifical Council for the Culture of the Vatican State. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us more about this agreement? Where did the idea come from, and what do you hope to achieve?
Okay, the idea actually started to come out once I was appointed this last January as a consultor for the Pontifical Council for Culture in the Vatican. And at that point in time, I was participating to both institutions, Sapienza University and the Pontifical Council. So it was quite, let's say, natural for me to bridge these two big institutions and to, as a matter of fact, to help this institution formalize something that was also already a bit going on already.
And Professor, specifically, what kinds of projects will the university and the Vatican work on?
Then there is also an interest in archaeology and preservation of artistic heritage. And a specific project already started on this, for example, in the preservation of some catacombs. There lies under some buildings in Sapienza. So there are already some agreements who are close to be signed for the preservation of these catacombs. And then there are other themes like music, sport. For example, the athletes of Atletica Vaticana are already trained in Sapienza Sporting Center. Or there is an issue which is connected to hard science and more explicitly on artificial intelligence, toward which there is great attention in the Pontifical Council for Culture. And in Sapienza, there are many scholars who are developing research in this field. And then the last one, but not the least, is, of course, researching on what we can call the new humanism after the pandemic, how habits, but also, let's say, the deep part of human beings are changed after this worldwide emergency and strong experience which has impacted all the world.
And quickly, before I let you go, can you talk how this partnership will help your university?
As I was saying, I was just naming artificial intelligence as one of the themes. And I guess in 2 weeks there will be a webinar in which we at Sapienza invited representatives of the Pontifical Council for Culture to discuss about ethics in biofabrication.
Well, Professor, thank you so much for your time today. Alessandro Talamo, professor at Sapienza University and consultant to the Pontifical Council for Culture of the Vatican State. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.